Welcome to this deep dive. We've gathered some really fascinating sources, and we're here to pull out the most interesting bits for you.
That's the plan.
Today we're focusing on a dinosaur that's, well, pretty remarkable. Aerosteon.
Ah, Aerosteon. And the name itself, it gives you a huge clue right away. It's Greek, basically means airbone.
Airbone. Okay, yeah, that definitely hints at something important.
It really does. It's one of the key reasons this dinosaur is so scientifically interesting.
And this creature, it was roaming around what's now Argentina.
Yep. Way back in the late Cretaceous,
Hmm.
specifically the late Campanian age.
The remains were found in the Anicula Formation, I think, near the Rio Colorado.
Exactly. Dug up in 1996 in the Mendoza province.
So our goal today is to really unpack what makes Aerosteon stand out. And a big part of that, as you hinted, is this evidence for a bird-like respiratory system.
That's the core of it, yeah. It's fascinating stuff.
Okay, so let's start at the beginning. The discovery itself.
Right, so the bones were found in 96. But the actual scientific description, the publication led by Paul Sereno and his team, that came out in 2008.
And it was published online first in PLS1.
It was, which actually led to a bit of an interesting situation.
Oh, not just a simple click publish then.
Not quite. See, back then, the rules for officially naming a new species, the International Code of Zoological Nomenclature, or ICZN, they had specific requirements about print publication.
Ah, right. You needed physical copies sent out.
You did.
Yeah.
Physical copies distributed to libraries and proof of that distribution. The initial online paper for Aerosteon didn't quite tick all those boxes immediately.
So wait, was Aerosteon sort of
Yeah.
unofficially named for a while? That's kind of funny.
It was in a bit of nomenclature limbo, yeah. It took some sorting out. The journal editor actually worked with the ICZN.
To fix it.
Yeah. They published a correction, an addendum, in May 2009. That confirmed all the requirements had been met by then.
So described online in 2008, but the official stamp came in 2009.
Pretty much. It's a neat little detail, actually. Shows how rigorous the scientific naming process aims to be, even adapting to, the digital world.
Definitely. Science has its procedures. Okay, so what bones were actually found? What made up this initial discovery?
The main specimen, the one that defines the species, the holotype, MCNA PV3137. It's not a complete skeleton, but a good mix.
Like what?
Some bits of the skull, vertebrae from the neck, the back, the sacrum, that's the fused part connecting to the hips. Also, lots of ribs, both neck and body ribs, and gastralia.
Gastralia. Those are the belly ribs, right?
Exactly. Those rib-like bones on the underside.
And wasn't there something about a tooth found with it? A bit of confusion there.
Ah, yes, good point. An isolated tooth was found nearby and initially thought to belong to Aerosteon.
But it didn't.
Nope. Turns out, after more analysis, it was identified as belonging to an abelisaurid.
A totally different type of theropod.
Completely different group. Yeah, typically more robust, different head shape. It really underlines how science works. You find something, you hypothesize, then you test it, sometimes you revise. Self-correction is key.
Absolutely. Okay, so the name sorted, we know what bones they had.
Yeah.
What about the size? How big was this airbone dinosaur?
Well, that's another area where the picture has shifted a bit over time. The original 2008 paper suggested it was pretty large,
How large?
around 9 to 10 meters long, so, 30, maybe 33 feet.
Wow.
Quite substantial.
Wow, but that estimate changed.
It did. A couple of years later, in 2010, Gregory S. Paul suggested a smaller size, more like 6 meters, about 20 feet, and maybe 500 kilograms.
It's a big difference from 30 feet down to 20.
It is. And then more recently, in 2016, Melina Perez and Lara Mendy came up with another estimate, sort of in between, actually.
Okay.
They suggested about 7.5 meters, so 25 feet, and weighing around a metric ton, maybe 1.1 short tons.
Huh. It's really interesting how these estimates get refined as we learn more or use different methods.
Definitely. It shows paleontology isn't static. We're always reassessing based on new finds or new ways of looking at the existing evidence.
So even without a full skeleton, scientists can piece together a picture.
They can. Based on the bones we have, comparing them to relatives, you can create life restorations, skeletal diagrams. It gives you a visual idea, at least.
Right. Now, let's talk about where Aerosteon fits in the grand scheme of things. Its family tree. You mentioned it didn't seem to fit the usual southern continent predator groups.
Correct. When it was first described, it didn't neatly slot into Abelisauridae, Carcharodontosauridae, or Spinosauridae. Those were the big players down south back then.
So where did they think it belonged initially?
Sereno's first thought in that 2008 paper was that it might be connected to the Allosauride radiation.
Allosaurids, like Allosaurus from the Jurassic.
Yeah.
But Aerosteon is late Cretaceous.
Exactly. So the idea was maybe it was part of a later surviving branch of that lineage. This led to more focus on a group called Megaraptora.
Megaraptora, okay, what defines them?
They're generally seen as a group, a clade, of relatively lightly built theropods, possibly late surviving allosauroids within a subgroup called Neovenatoridae. They often have these large hand claws, a bit like Spinosaurs in that regard.
And Aerosteons seem to fit that mold.
It did. That became a common placement for it, a Megaraptoran, like a holdout from an older group, as you said.
Pretty cool.
Yeah.
But I sense a but coming.
Well, yeah. Dinosaur relationships are complicated. Later studies started suggesting something different. Some analyses placed Megaraptora, Aerosteon included, within Tyrannosauridae.
Whoa, related to T-Rex, that's a major shift.
It is, moving it from the Allosauroid side of the tree right over towards the Tyrannosaur side. It's been a point of debate.
Has it been settled?
Not entirely. To make it even more complex, some other analyses have suggested maybe Megaraptorans aren't Tyrannosaurids or Allosaurids, but perhaps basal Coelurosaurs sort of on their own branch closer to the base of the group that includes Tyrannosaurs, birds, and ornithomimids.
Wow, okay, so its exact position is still kind of up in the air.
It's definitely an active area of research. Different data sets, different analytical methods can sometimes give you different results. It shows the process in action.
The sources mentioned cladograms showing these different ideas.
Right. Cladograms are just those branching diagrams, the family trees. One study from 2010 by Benson and colleagues put Megaraptorans within a big group called Titanorae, which actually includes both Allosaurids and Coelurosaurs like Tyrannosaurs. But another study, Porphyry et al., in 2014, placed them specifically within Tyrannosauridae.
So the diagrams visually show these competing hypotheses.
Exactly. They map out the relationships based on the evidence analyzed in that particular study.
And then there's Raptor, another Patagonian dinosaur. How does it relate?
Raptor is considered very, very closely related to Aerosteon, described more recently in 2016.
Similarities.
Oh yeah, very similar skull bones, similar vertebrae. But there are differences too. The hip bone, the ilium, has different proportions. It's taller in Aerosteon.
And the teeth. Did Raptor help clear up that tooth issue?
It did, actually. The main Raptor fossil did have teeth associated with it, and they looked quite different from that single stray tooth found with Aerosteon. So that added more weight to the idea that the original tooth wasn't Aerosteon's.
Interesting. And did Raptor have the air bones too?
To some extent, yes, but apparently less so than Aerosteon. Some of its bones seem to show less pneumaticity, less hollowing out.
Which brings us neatly back to Aerosteon's most famous feature, that bird-like respiratory system.
Yeah.
What's the actual bone evidence?
It's all about that extensive pneumatization we talked about, the air-filled spaces inside the bones.
So hollow bones.
Essentially, yes. But not just hollow like a pipe. They have complex internal struts and cavities where air sacs connected to the lungs would have infiltrated the bone tissue.
And this wasn't just in the vertebrae like in many theropods.
No, that's the key thing with Aerosteon. It's much more widespread. We see clear evidence of pneumatic hollowing in the wishbone, in the ilium, that big hip bone.
Right.
And even in several of the gastralia, the belly ribs, that's quite unusual.
Wow. So air sacs were invading bones all over its torso.
It certainly looks that way. They even found pneumatophores, little openings on the surface of the ilium where the air sacs likely connected to the inside of the bone.
Incredible. They compared the wishbone to a modern bird's, didn't they?
They did. They used stereo images to compare Aerosteon's furcula with a magpie goose's, visually showing the similar internal structure and hollows. It's pretty compelling evidence.
So what's the big evolutionary picture here? Why is this so important?
Because it strongly suggests Aerosteon had a respiratory system that was well on its way to becoming like that of modern birds. Birds have this incredibly efficient system with air sacs extending from the lungs into bones.
Kill some fly, right? High metabolism.
Exactly. It allows for a unidirectional flow of air through the lungs, meaning they get fresh oxygen during both inhalation and exhalation, effectively. Finding such extensive pneumatization in Aerosteon suggests these complex structures evolved much earlier than we might have thought, and not necessarily linked directly to flight.
How would it have worked compared to us? You said unidirectional flow.
Yeah, it's quite different. Our lungs, mammalian lungs, work like bellows. Air goes in, air goes out the same way. In birds, and likely in dinosaurs like Aerosteon with these air sacs, the sacs themselves act like bellows, pushing air through relatively rigid lungs, mostly in one direction.
So constant flow of fresh air across the gas exchange surfaces.
Pretty much, it's super efficient. You can really get lost learning about the details of avian breathing. It's fascinating.
A major advantage. But didn't Sereno suggest it might not have originally evolved for breathing?
That's a really interesting hypothesis they put forward. They suggested that maybe this extensive air sac system spreading throughout the body initially evolved primarily for thermoregulation.
For cooling down.
Yeah, all those internal air sacs would create a huge surface area, potentially very effective for shedding excess body heat, especially in a large active animal.
So a cooling system that later got co-opted or enhanced for breathing.
That's the idea. It's plausible evolution often repurposes existing structures for new functions.
Fascinating. Okay, just to pin down the timeline again, when did Aerosteon live?
The rocks it was found in, the Anacloto Formation, date to about 84 million years ago. That puts it in the Santonian stage of the late Cretaceous.
Right. So wrapping this up, Aerosteon. It's clearly more than just another fossil find.
Oh, absolutely. It gives us this incredible window into some major evolutionary transitions.
The key things to remember are
Definitely those unique air-filled bones and what they tell us about the evolution of that super efficient bird-like respiratory system. That's probably the headline feature.
and its somewhat debated place in the dinosaur family tree.
Right. That ongoing puzzle highlights how science refines our understanding as new discoveries are made. Megaraptorin, Tyrannosauroid, something else. The detective work continues.
Plus that little quirk about its naming and the publication process.
Yeah, even the backstory of its formal description is kind of interesting.
So here's something to think about as you digest all this. We see these air-filled bones and think breathing, but as we discussed, maybe it started as temperature control.
Exactly.
It makes you wonder, doesn't it? How many other features in extinct animals, or even living ones, might have started out serving one purpose before being adapted for something completely different? What hidden evolutionary stories are still waiting to be uncovered in fossils?
It really opens up your perspective on how complex and sometimes unexpected the path of evolution can be. It definitely encourages you to look deeper into things like how bird breathing evolved and just keep an eye on the amazing discoveries still coming out of paleontology.